The conference room at Lawson Enterprises froze when Richard Lawson, the 55-year-old billionaire CEO, looked up and saw two men who could have been mirror images of his younger self. Ethan Brooks Lawson, a calm, confident strategist, and Aaron Brooks Lawson, a bold executive with sharper edge, stood before him presenting their merger proposal. The name on the folder, Brooks Lawson Ventures, sent a chill through Rick's spine. His throat tightened, memories he'd buried for 25 years clawing back. He didn't know who these men truly were, but something deep inside whispered the impossible truth. His past had just walked into his boardroom alive. Before we unravel how two abandoned sons turned their father's empire upside down, make sure you don't miss the stories that touch hearts and test conscience. Subscribe now. Like this video if you believe redemption deserves a second chance, and share it with someone who loves emotional, twist-filled dramas. Drop a comment telling us what you'd do if your buried secret appeared in front of your colleagues. Your interaction helps this channel reach more viewers who crave raw, soulful storytelling. Stay tuned. What happens next will challenge everything you think you know about love, pride, and forgiveness. 25 years earlier, Atlanta, Georgia. The rain beat hard against the hospital's tin roof as Danielle Brooks, a 20-year-old nursing student, struggled to hold her newborn twins. She looked exhausted but radiant, whispering, "Ethan and Aaron, you're my whole world." The door creaked open and Richard Lawson, her older boyfriend and rising business investor, stepped inside with panic in his eyes. "They're mine?" he asked in disbelief. Danielle nodded through tears. Rick stared at the babies, their brown skin and curly hair reflecting a truth his pride couldn't handle. "Danielle, I can't let anyone see them. My company, my image, everything will collapse." He turned, leaving her heartbroken. "Richard, please don't walk away." Danielle cried, clutching her children tighter as thunder cracked above the city. But Richard Lawson's guilt was weaker than his fear. He shoved his hands into his pockets, eyes filled with shame. "You don't understand, Danielle. My mother would disown me. Investors would leave. I can't lose everything." He left the room before she could speak again. Outside, lightning illuminated the drenched parking lot as he disappeared into the storm. Danielle sank to the floor, whispering, "Then I'll raise them myself." She kissed each boy's forehead, vowing that no matter how cruel the world became, she'd never abandon them. 5 years later, Atlanta's streets glistened with heavy rain as Danielle Brooks rushed out of a pharmacy, holding medicine for Ethan's high fever. She balanced the umbrella while guiding both boys toward home. Traffic lights flickered. Thunder echoed. Suddenly, a delivery truck lost control on the slick road, hydroplaning toward them. Danielle screamed, pushing Ethan to safety, but Aaron slipped from her grip. Tires screeched, metal crunched, and darkness followed. When Danielle awoke in the hospital, her head bandaged, Dr. Naomi Carter, a kind young resident, told her that Ethan survived, but Aaron had been taken to another clinic by a bystander. That bystander was Margaret Carter, a retired teacher who lived nearby. She found Aaron Brooks unconscious on the sidewalk, clutching a soaked beaded bracelet engraved E+A. When hospital staff misplaced Danielle's contact information during the chaotic flood, Margaret, thinking the boy was orphaned, took custody through emergency foster care. Weeks later, paperwork turned permanent, and Aaron became Aaron Carter, raised in Boston under wealth and structure. Danielle searched newspapers, police stations, and churches for years with no trace. Her only comfort was Ethan's laughter, reminding her that one half of her heart still beat beside her. Years turned into decades. Ethan Brooks Lawson grew into a disciplined young man, guided by Danielle's resilience. She worked 2 jobs and encouraged education above all. Ethan excelled at the University of Georgia, where a scholarship donor named Charles Bennett took interest in his potential. Bennett, a corporate lawyer from New York, funded Ethan's research project and promised mentorship. Neither knew fate's irony, that Charles Bennett was Richard Lawson's oldest friend and eventual enemy. Through Bennett's guidance, Ethan entered the business world unaware he was slowly walking back into the shadow of the man who once abandoned his family. Meanwhile, Aaron Carter grew underprivileged in Boston. Margaret Carter, his adoptive mother, ensured he had every advantage: private tutors, travel, and discipline. But even luxury couldn't fill the emptiness he felt when he looked at the bracelet he'd worn since childhood. "You came from love," Margaret would say, never revealing she found him during a tragedy. Aaron graduated from Harvard, ambitious but restless. After Margaret passed away, her will left a letter confessing the truth, that he'd been adopted under uncertain circumstances. Holding that letter, Aaron booked a flight to New York City, determined to uncover his lost beginnings. At the same time, Ethan Brooks Lawson relocated to New York after accepting a managerial position at Lawson Enterprises. He had no idea the company's owner, Richard Lawson, was his biological father. Impressed by Ethan's credentials, Allison Rivera, the company's human resources manager, introduced him to senior leadership. 2 days later, a new consultant arrived, Aaron Carter, hired for a joint project. When the brothers met in the elevator, both froze. Their resemblance was undeniable, yet neither spoke. "You look familiar," Aaron murmured. "Maybe fate has a sense of humor," Ethan replied with a grin, unaware how prophetic his words were. During a weekly briefing, Richard Lawson first encountered them together. Ethan presented confidently while Aaron observed, arms folded, skeptical yet intrigued. Richard's pulse quickened when he saw Ethan's name on the presentation slide, Brooks Lawson Strategies. The surname jolted him. "Brooks," he whispered under his breath. His assistant, Ellen Porter, noticed his trembling hand. "Sir, are you all right?" He forced a smile. "Fine." But inside, panic brewed. He dismissed the meeting early, ordering Ellen to arrange private background checks on both new executives. Decades of buried guilt began to stir as he stared at the rain streaking his office window, just like that night long ago. In the days that followed, Ethan's intelligence and humility impressed everyone at Lawson Enterprises. He worked late nights, driven by integrity. Aaron, however, became suspicious of the company's inner dealings, uncovering unethical contracts tied to Charles Bennett's name. "You're defending the man who mentored me," Ethan said when Aaron confronted him. "Maybe he's not who you think he is," Aaron replied coldly. Their professional rivalry deepened, unaware they were brothers standing on opposite sides of the same secret. Meanwhile, Richard Lawson received the confidential reports confirming their ages, origins, and connection to Danielle Brooks. His chest tightened. The impossible was real. That night, Richard Lawson sat alone in his penthouse study, clutching an old photograph of Danielle Brooks, the one taken before she gave birth. Her smile haunted him. "Danielle, what have I done?" he whispered. He traced her face, then looked at the file on his desk labeled Brooks Lawson. It was no coincidence. His sins had finally grown old enough to find him. He reached for his phone but hesitated, afraid of what she'd say if she heard his voice after 25 years. For the first time in his empire's history, the king of Lawson Enterprises couldn't control his own story. 2 days later, Lawson Enterprises, New York City. 2 mornings later, Richard Lawson arrived at Lawson Enterprises earlier than usual, his reflection in the elevator glass showing sleepless eyes and guilt. Inside his office, Ellen Porter, his loyal executive assistant, placed 2 folders on his desk. "Background reports on Ethan Brooks Lawson and Aaron Carter, sir," she said softly. Rick's hands trembled as he opened the files. Both men were born 25 years ago in Atlanta. Same hospital, same day. His chest tightened as memories of that stormy night flooded back. "No, it can't be," he muttered, though deep down, every line of the report whispered that it could. Unable to concentrate, Richard Lawson called Charles Bennett, his longtime legal partner and closest confidant. "Charles, I need to talk." "Privately," he said, his voice hoarse. Within an hour, Bennett entered his office, carrying his usual calm arrogance. "What's troubling you, Rick?" Lawson slid the files across the table. Bennett's brow furrowed. "Those names, where did you find them?" Richard leaned forward, whispering, "They work here." Bennett exhaled slowly. "Then fate has a cruel sense of humor," he said. But the smirk behind his words carried something else, knowledge. Unknown to Richard, Charles Bennett had already discovered the truth weeks earlier. Across the building, Ethan Brooks Lawson prepared for a strategic pitch with the finance department. His calm professionalism made him well-liked, while Aaron Carter's bold nature often sparked conflict. That morning, Aaron stormed into the meeting room, holding printed contracts. "These projections are false," he said sharply. "They hide money routed to a law firm in Boston, Bennett and Cole." Ethan frowned. "Charles Bennett's firm? He's our chief counsel." Aaron nodded. "Exactly." The room fell silent. Ethan wanted proof, but Aaron's intensity unsettled him. Two brothers unknowingly stood on opposite sides of the same conspiracy, connected by blood and secrets they couldn't see. Later that day, Charles Bennett met Richard Lawson in the executive lounge overlooking Manhattan. "You should have told me sooner," Bennett said smoothly. "They deserve to know." Richard's jaw clenched. "No, not until I'm certain." Bennett studied him, eyes cold. "You've built your empire on appearances. Are you prepared to see it burn when the truth comes out?" Richard's silence answered for him. Bennett rose, adjusting his cufflinks. "Then I'll handle this my way." When he left, Richard sensed danger but couldn't define it. He didn't realize Bennett was already planting whispers through the company, turning allies into enemies. That evening, Ellen Porter returned with additional research. "Sir, we found something else. Danielle Brooks, she's still alive." The words made Richard's heart pound. "Where?" "Atlanta," Ellen replied. "She's running a small community clinic." He nodded slowly, staring out at the city skyline. "Book me a flight for Friday morning." After she left, he poured whiskey into a glass, hands trembling. The idea of seeing Danielle again terrified him. What could he say to a woman he'd abandoned? Outside, lightning split the sky, echoing the storm from 25 years ago. History, it seemed, was preparing to repeat itself. Meanwhile, in the staff cafeteria, Aaron Carter confronted Ethan Brooks Lawson. "You really trust his company?" Aaron asked, voice low. "You think Bennett's money built your career for free?" Ethan frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Aaron tossed a document onto the table, a list of shell accounts tied to Bennett's firm. "Someone's laundering money through Lawson Enterprises." Ethan scanned the papers, disbelief washing over him. "These could ruin the company," he murmured. "Maybe that's the point," Aaron replied coldly. For the first time, Ethan sensed danger not just around them, but between them. That night, in Bennett's private office, he spoke quietly on the phone. "Yes, proceed with the media leak. Let's see how our dear Richard handles the truth when it's public." He hung up, smirking. Bennett's motive was simple. He'd spent decades living in Richard Lawson's shadow, building success but never receiving credit. Now, by weaponizing the twins' existence, he could destroy Richard and take the company for himself. Outside his window, Manhattan glowed with artificial light. Unaware of the scandal about to ignite, the first anonymous email was already written, scheduled to send by morning. The next morning, Allison Rivera, the HR manager, noticed tension across departments. "Ethan, Aaron, Mr. Lawson wants you in the main conference room," she said nervously. Inside, Richard sat stiffly at the head of the table, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. "Gentlemen," he began, "your work has been impressive." His voice faltered as he looked at their faces, his sons. "But I need transparency on this Bennett situation." Ethan hesitated. "Sir, are we under investigation?" Richard nodded slightly. "You could say that." Across the table, Aaron's jaw tightened. Every word felt like a countdown to something no one could stop. After the meeting, Ethan followed Richard into the hallway. "Mr. Lawson, if there's an issue, I want to fix it," he said sincerely. Richard forced a faint smile. "You remind me of someone I once knew, a good person." Ethan tilted his head, puzzled. Was he family? Richard froze, throat tight. In another life, maybe. Ethan walked away, unaware his question had pierced decades of buried guilt. Alone, Richard whispered, "You're my family, son." But fate wasn't ready for reconciliation yet. The storm building outside signaled the chaos to come. That evening, Richard Lawson stood on his penthouse balcony, rain falling softly around him. In his hand was a flight confirmation to Atlanta, an attempt to face Danielle Brooks and find answers. Behind him, his phone buzzed with a new email notification. Urgent. Lawson Enterprise corruption leak. The sender was anonymous, but he knew instantly it was Charles Bennett. Panic filled his chest. Tomorrow's headlines would expose not only his business secrets, but possibly his hidden sons. Lightning flared across the Manhattan skyline, illuminating the fear in his eyes. The past wasn't knocking anymore. It had broken down the door. The following morning, Atlanta, Georgia, the private jet touched down under gray Atlanta skies as Richard Lawson stepped out, his reflection in the cabin window revealing the toll of sleepless nights. He adjusted his coat and inhaled deeply, the humid southern air carrying echoes of the past. The driver escorted him through familiar streets until the car stopped outside Brooks Community Health Clinic. He hesitated before entering, gripping the door handle. Inside, he could see Danielle Brooks tending to patients, her calm demeanor unchanged. Memories rushed in, her laughter, the way she once said love was stronger than shame. Now, he wasn't sure she'd believe it. Inside the modest clinic, Danielle Brooks finished bandaging a young child's arm when a nurse whispered, "Ms. Brooks, there's a visitor. Says his name is Richard Lawson." The name struck her like thunder. Her hands froze midair. "Show him to my office," she murmured, steadying her breath. The nurse nodded. Danielle stared at her reflection in a small mirror, aging yet dignified. She smoothed her gray streaks of hair and whispered, "You knew this day would come." When the door opened and Richard Lawson stepped inside, silence swallowed them both. Two souls imprisoned by time, standing face to face after 25 years. Richard Lawson stood awkwardly near the door, his expensive suit clashing with the humble warmth of the clinic. "Danielle," he began, voice cracking, "I came to say what I should have said long ago." Danielle crossed her arms. "You mean sorry? Or that you finally remember we existed?" He exhaled heavily. "Both." His gaze dropped. "I was weak, scared of losing everything." Danielle's eyes burned with controlled anger. "And you lost us instead." The weight of her words crushed him. "I've lived every day regretting it," he said softly. "Regret doesn't raise children, Richard. Love does, and you chose pride." Danielle Brooks turned toward a filing cabinet and pulled out an old envelope. "I kept something," she said, placing a photograph on the desk. It showed her younger self in the hospital, holding two babies wrapped in white blankets, the E plus a bracelet gleaming on Aaron's wrist. Richard's hand trembled as he picked it up. "I only had the crop version," he whispered. "I didn't even realize." Tears welled in his eyes. Danielle nodded. "Because you never look back." The room grew still as past and present collided. Proof of the family he abandoned, finally confronting him with truth and evidence. Danielle leaned against the desk, her tone softening. "After the flood, I searched hospitals, shelters, even orphanages. The police lost our records. They said paperwork drowned in the storm." She blinked back tears. "By the time I traced one lead, Aaron was already adopted." Richard rubbed his temples, guilt consuming him. "I never knew," he whispered. "Of course you didn't," she replied bitterly. "You were too busy hiding." She sighed. "But Ethan, he saved me. I didn't have much, but we built a life." Her voice cracked. "Now they're men, Richard, and they don't need your guilt. They need your honesty." The moment hung heavy until Ellen Porter, calling from New York, interrupted it. "Sir, there's been a breach," she said urgently over the phone. "The media has picked up the story. Lawson Enterprises, hidden heirs, and financial corruption. It's everywhere." Richard's heart dropped. Danielle could hear fragments of the call, her expression shifting from anger to alarm. "You brought this on yourself," she said quietly. "But they'll drag your sons into it too." Richard clenched his jaw. "Then I need to go back. Protect them before Bennett does more damage." Danielle nodded slowly. "If you mean that, don't protect your name. Protect them." In Boston, Aaron Carter sat in his hotel suite, staring at an email from a journalist claiming to represent a truth-seeking network. Attached was a draft headline, "Billionaire's Hidden Black Twin Sons. Corporate Lies Exposed." The sender promised to help him tell his side before the world twisted it. Aaron's pulse raced. Could this be his chance to control the story, or destroy his father's empire completely? He poured a drink, hand shaking. You wanted the truth, Aaron, he whispered to himself. Now let's see how ugly it really is. Outside, the city lights blinked like warning signals in the dark. Back in Atlanta, Danielle Brooks faced Richard Lawson, eyes fierce again. You want redemption? Then fight for them, not yourself. Stop worrying about what the world thinks. Let them see who you are, flawed human, broken maybe, but fighting for family. Richard's shoulders sagged. I don't know how to fix what I've destroyed. Danielle stepped closer. You start by standing beside your sons when the truth hits, not hiding behind lawyers or stock prices. He nodded slowly. Then I'll face it all. Danielle's expression softened. Good, because this time you won't run from the storm. You'll stand in it. The clinic door opened quietly, and Dr. Naomi Carter walked in, now a respected attending physician. Danielle, I came as soon as I heard the name, she said, recognizing Richard instantly. You were at the hospital that night, Richard said, astonished. Yes, I delivered Aaron's twin. I remember the chaos when the power failed. She handed Danielle an old hospital ledger she'd kept, a faded record proving Ethan and Aaron's simultaneous birth. This can protect them from speculation, she explained. Richard took it reverently. Thank you. Dr. Carter smiled. Truth has a way of surviving storms, Mr. Lawson. Moments later, all three of their phones buzzed simultaneously. A headline glared across every screen. Billionaire Richard Lawson exposed, hidden family and corporate fraud allegations surface. Richard's breath caught. Danielle looked up at him, fear and resolve colliding. It's begun, she whispered. Reporters were already gathering outside the clinic. Richard turned to her, voice trembling. Please, Danielle, help me shield Ethan and Aaron. Don't let the world destroy them for my sins. Danielle nodded, gripping his arm. Then we face it together. Outside, thunder rolled again, but this time neither of them ran. They stepped toward the storm side by side. The same day, Lawson Enterprises, New York City. Morning sunlight barely touched Manhattan before news vans crowded the front of Lawson Enterprises. Cameramen yelled questions. Microphones waved like weapons. Employees whispered in hallways, scrolling through headlines naming Richard Lawson as the billionaire who'd abandoned secret twin heirs. Inside, Ethan Brooks Lawson stood frozen near the lobby's glass doors, flashes exploding beyond them. Mr. Brooks Lawson, is it true you're the son? Someone shouted. Security pulled him back, but humiliation flushed his face. His mother's name trending online. His employer disgraced. The world had learned what even he didn't fully know. The truth wasn't whispered anymore. It screamed from every screen. On the 20th floor, employees gathered like anxious spectators. Ethan Brooks Lawson entered the conference room, sleeves rolled up, voice steady despite chaos. Until Mr. Lawson addresses this, operations continue. No one panics, no leaks. He spoke with the calm of a leader he didn't realize he was becoming. A reporter's voice on television blared. Sources claimed two executives may be the twins in question. Faces turned toward him. Ethan forced a composed smile. Back to work, he said quietly, then stepped into the restroom and locked the door. Only there did he allow tears to fall for the life unraveling in seconds. Across town, Aaron Carter sat opposite an investigative journalist inside a dim Boston cafe. The reporter slid a recorder between them. Off the record, she promised. I just want your side. Aaron swirled the untouched coffee. My side? I didn't even know I had a father worth hiding. His bitterness spilled like poison. He abandoned my mother and left us to survive storms while he built an empire. The reporter's pen scratched fast. Aaron hesitated. He hadn't named names yet, but rage felt cleansing. When he left, he didn't realize Charles Bennett had already purchased the story before sunrise. At 11 a.m., Charles Bennett strode into Lawson Enterprises headquarters flanked by attorneys. Emergency board meeting, effective immediately, he declared. Members shuffled inside, confusion painted on every face. Mr. Lawson's absence and public scandal jeopardized investor confidence. Bennett announced, projecting leaked financial statements. For stability, we propose new leadership, me. Gasps rippled through the room. "You're exploiting chaos," Ellen Porter whispered from the corner. Bennett smirked. "I'm saving the company from sentimentality." He began the vote, confident victory was certain. But as hands raised, the elevator chimed, and Richard Lawson stepped out, rain-soaked, eyes blazing, prepared to reclaim both truth and name. "Meeting's not over yet," Richard Lawson said, storming into the boardroom. His voice carried the weight of 25 guilty years. "Sit down, Charles." Bennett stiffened, masking surprise. "You've lost control, Rick." Richard slammed a folder on the table. "Maybe, but I haven't lost my soul." He faced the board. "Everything you've heard is true. I'm guilty, not a fraud, but of cowardice. Those twins, they're my sons." Silence devoured the room. Cameras clicked as journalists outside pressed against glass. This company was built on secrets. No more. For the first time, he wasn't offending power. He was surrendering to truth. In the corridor, Ethan Brooks Lawson paused mid-stride when the announcement echoed through the building's intercom feed from the boardroom. "They're my sons." The words sliced through him. He leaned against the wall, dizzy. "My sons." Employees stared as he staggered toward the elevator, disbelief clouding every thought. Downstairs, Aaron Carter entered, summoned by Bennett's assistant, unaware what had just occurred. When the brothers met outside the boardroom doors, both stopped, one shaking with confusion, the other with anger. "Did you know?" Ethan asked. Aaron's eyes hardened. "No. Did you?" Neither spoke again as the truth finally connected their bloodlines. Minutes later, chaos consumed the lobby. Reporters cornered Aaron Carter, shouting, "Are you the son?" Cameras flashed. "No comment," he barked, pushing through the crowd. Upstairs, Ethan Brooks Lawson confronted him by the elevators. "You fed them the story, didn't you?" Aaron's jaw flexed. "Maybe they deserve to know." Ethan's voice cracked. "You just handed our lives to wolves." Aaron glared back. "I didn't create the lie, Ethan." "He did." Security guards separated them as employees watched, hearts heavy. For the first time since fate reunited them, the brothers truly saw each other, not as strangers, but reflections shaped by opposite worlds. In the executive atrium, Richard Lawson faced his sons under the glare of fluorescent lights and flashing cameras. "Enough," he thundered. "You're brothers, not enemies." Aaron laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the world you lied to." Richard's shoulders slumped. "I deserve your anger, but not their hatred. Don't let my sin divide you." Ethan whispered, "It already has." Reporters snapped every tear, every tremor. For a moment, the powerful soul looked simply human, a father drowning in consequences. "Walk away from me," he pleaded, "but don't destroy each other." Yet the silence that followed was louder than any apology could be. As chaos peaked, Ellen Porter burst into the room with printed documents. Everyone stopped. Bennett fabricated half the evidence. Shock rippled. "I found wire transfers." He paid journalists to twist the story. She handed them to the board's chairwoman. He framed this to seize control. Charles Bennett turned pale. "Lies!" he shouted, but the room buzzed with outrage. Security moved toward him as reporters filmed his downfall live. Richard exhaled shakily, whispering, "Thank you, Ellen." She nodded. Truth deserves witnesses. Bennett's legacy shattered as quickly as Richard's was reborn, not as perfection, but as painful honesty. By evening, Lawson Enterprises stood bruised but breathing. Outside, protesters and journalists dispersed while police escorted Charles Bennett away in handcuffs. In the dim hallway, Ethan Brooks Lawson and Aaron Carter passed each other without words, the distance between them greater than blood could bridge. Inside his office, Richard Lawson removed his cufflinks, staring at his reflection in the dark window. "Truth costs everything," he murmured. Ellen Porter approached. "Sometimes it buys peace." He nodded faintly. "Maybe." As city lights blinked beyond the glass, the empire he built felt smaller, but the chance to rebuild something real had just begun. The aftermath, New York and Atlanta, the morning after the chaos, Richard Lawson stood before cameras outside Lawson Enterprises. His face was pale but resolute. "Effective immediately," he announced. I am stepping down as CEO. Reporters shouted questions, but he didn't flinch. My mistake shouldn't define the men my sons have become. He left the podium without fanfare, his resignation letter already filed. Inside, employees watched in silence. For the first time in years, there was no applause, only respect for a man finally brave enough to lose everything for the truth. The empire remained, but its crown had chosen humility over power. Later that day, Ethan Brooks Lawson drove to Brooks Community Health Clinic in Atlanta. Inside, Danielle Brooks greeted patients as if the world hadn't just learned her story. "You look tired," she said softly, handing him tea. Ethan sat, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to feel, Mom. Angry? Relieved?" Danielle smiled faintly. "Feel both. You've earned the right." He looked around the clinic, the modest space built from nothing but her strength. "How did you survive all this?" he asked. "By loving what I had, not what I lost," she replied. For the first time, Ethan truly understood resilience. Meanwhile, in Boston, Aaron Carter sat in his hotel room, television muted, but headlines flashing across the screen. Every word, betrayal, hidden heirs, family scandal, felt like a bullet. He clenched his fists, regret pressing hard against pride. The journalist he'd spoken to had sold his anger, twisting his pain into profit. He stared at his reflection. "You wanted revenge," he whispered, "and you burned yourself instead." Pulling out his phone, he typed a message to Ethan. "We need to talk." His thumb hovered before sending. For the first time in years, guilt outweighed the satisfaction of being right. That evening, television stations cut to a live broadcast. Richard Lawson sat across from veteran journalist Diane Turner, his expression calm yet somber. "I hid the truth because I was ashamed," he said. "But shame can't erase blood. Ethan and Aaron are my sons, and they're innocent." The studio was silent. Diane leaned forward. "You understand this could destroy your reputation?" Richard nodded. "Maybe it should. Maybe that's the only way to rebuild as a man instead of a myth." Viewers across America saw not a billionaire, but father finally willing to stand naked before the truth. Across the country, reactions flooded social media. Some mocked, others forgave, but most simply felt something human in his words. In Atlanta, Danielle Brooks watched from her office computer, silent tears tracing her cheeks. "He finally said it," she whispered. Her nurses gathered around, unsure whether to console or celebrate. "He's not excused," Danielle said softly, "but he's trying." Outside, children laughed in the courtyard as sunlight broke through gray clouds. For the first time in decades, the air around her felt lighter, as if pain, too, could tire of clinging and finally choose to let go. That night, Ethan Brooks Lawson met Aaron Carter in a quiet park near the Hudson River. Neither spoke at first. The city hummed softly behind them. "I shouldn't have talked to the reporter," Aaron said finally, eyes down. "I just wanted to hurt him." Ethan nodded. "And I shouldn't have defended him without knowing the truth." They stood in silence, two grown men carrying decades of another man's sins. "We both lost something we never got to choose," Ethan said. Aaron exhaled. "Then maybe we start choosing now." For the first time, their voices sounded less like rivals and more like brothers. They walked for hours, exchanging fragments of their pasts, stories of childhood shaped by absence. Aaron laughed bitterly, describing private tutors and loneliness. Ethan countered with memories of scraped knees and second-hand shoes. Somewhere in between, laughter softened into peace. "Maybe Mom was right," Ethan said. "Love doesn't wait for permission." Aaron smirked. "She sounds like someone I'd like to know." Ethan smiled faintly. "She'd been waiting to meet you." The night wind carried their unspoken relief. For the first time, they didn't feel like strangers from opposite worlds. They felt like two halves finding their way home. 2 days later, Danielle Brooks stood outside her clinic as a black SUV stopped in front. Ethan Brooks Lawson, Aaron Carter, and Richard Lawson stepped out together. For a moment, time froze. Danielle's breath caught as she saw both sons side by side, men she had once rocked in the same arms. Aaron approached first, tears already falling. "Mom," he whispered, and she pulled him close. Richard waited, hesitant, until Danielle met his eyes. "You finally brought them home," she said softly. He nodded. If you'll still have me here. One day at a time, Richard, she replied, voice trembling. That evening, the four of them sat on the small porch behind the clinic. No media, no chaos, just the sound of crickets and peace. Richard Lawson spoke quietly. I sold my penthouse, he said. I'm moving here for a while. No press, no business, just family. Danielle looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. You can stay, but you rebuild this the right way, with presence, not promises. Ethan and Aaron exchanged glances, both smiling faintly. For the first time, silence felt safe between them, a silence that healed instead of hiding. Night fell slowly over Atlanta. Inside the small living room, laughter replaced tension. Ethan Brooks Lawson teased his brother about the Boston accent. Aaron Carter defended himself with mock pride. Danielle poured tea while Richard Lawson watched them quietly, eyes wet but peaceful. The storm that had shadowed them for 25 years was finally gone. Outside, the wind carried faint echoes of thunder, but this time it felt distant, like a memory finally laid to rest. The family sat together, bound not by perfection, but by forgiveness. Truth had torn them apart, yet it was truth that made them whole again. 6 months later, Boston Harbor Promenade. 6 months slipped by quietly, and life learned new rhythms. Richard Lawson rented a modest townhouse on the outskirts of Atlanta, trading boardrooms for early breakfasts and long evening walks. Danielle Brooks let him show up, not as a savior, but as a man keeping ordinary promises. Rides to doctor visits, grocery runs, porch conversations that didn't need speeches. Ethan Brooks Lawson split time between New York and Atlanta, consulting while rebuilding trust with his mother and the man he now cautiously called Dad. Aaron Carter moved slower, visiting on weekends, testing the ground beneath this fragile, growing family. Healing didn't hurry, it simply held. They came to Boston together for a quiet reason. Aaron Carter wanted them to visit Margaret Carter's resting place. He led the way through the small cemetery, the Atlantic breeze moving low grasses like a whisper. She saved me, Aaron said, placing a hand on the simple stone. She wasn't perfect, but she never let me wonder if I was wanted. Danielle Brooks slipped her arm through his. Then we thank her, she murmured. Richard Lawson stood back, hat in hand, humbled by the woman who carried a burden he dropped. I owe her a lifetime of gratitude, he said softly. Near sunset, they walked from the cemetery to the Boston Harbor Promenade, the water turning bronze beneath a lavender sky. Street musicians played something tender. Gulls lifted and fell like paper kites. Ethan Brooks Lawson leaned on the railing beside Danielle Brooks. I used to think forgiveness would feel like fireworks, he said. It feels quiet. Danielle smiled. Quiet is where truth can breathe. He watched Richard Lawson and Aaron Carter talking a few yards away. Do you trust him? He asked. I trust what I can see, Danielle replied. A man trying every day. That's more than I had before. A few benches down, Richard Lawson faced Aaron Carter with the patience of a student, not the pride of a king. I'm sorry for every year I wasn't there, Richard said. For every birthday I didn't know. Every night you wondered why you didn't belong. Aaron stared at the tide. I belonged, he answered. Just not where I started. He turned, eyes steady. I'm not asking you to erase my life with Margaret Carter. I'm asking you to respect it. Richard nodded immediately. I do. And if I ever forget, you remind me. I'll learn it again. Aaron's shoulders finally lowered. A couple recognized him. Whispers, a lifted phone, a hesitant step forward. Ellen Porter's media briefing months ago had helped close the circus, but curiosity never disappears completely. Ethan Brooks Lawson met the couple halfway and with a kind smile said, Tonight's just family. The strangers nodded, retreating with unexpected grace. Danielle Brooks exhaled slowly. The world can watch, she said, but they don't get to narrate us anymore. Richard Lawson let the words settle. For once, silence wasn't a verdict. It was protection, a small, steady roof they held up together against the weather of other people's opinions. They sat along the railing, and Aaron Carter turned the old bracelet in his fingers, the one engraved E+ that somehow survived storms and years. "About my name," he said, glancing between them. "I'm keeping Carter. It's who raised me. But I want you to know I don't need a hyphen to belong here." Danielle Brooks's eyes filled. Richard Lawson swallowed hard. Ethan Brooks Lawson bumped his shoulder. "Names tell history," Ethan said. "Love writes the present." Aaron slipped the bracelet back on. "Then let this be our signature. Simple, stubborn, and impossible to break." They planned small things, not grand gestures. Danielle Brooks proposed Sunday dinners with rotating chefs. Richard Lawson promised therapy, real therapy, not headlines, and invited the brothers to join if they wanted. Ethan Brooks Lawson offered to review the clinic's accounting system, laughing when Danielle swatted his arm for bringing spreadsheets to supper. Aaron Carter volunteered to repaint the clinic's exam rooms, choosing colors that felt like summer. None of it would make a news crawl. All of it felt like scaffolding, sturdy, ordinary human, built not to impress a world that judged them, but to hold a life they were choosing. A vendor passed with white roses wrapped in brown paper. Ethan Brooks Lawson bought 4 and handed one to each of them. "For the past," he said. "Not to worship it, just to set it down." They stepped to the edge of the promenade, the harbor lapping softly below. Danielle Brooks kissed her rose. Richard Lawson whispered a private apology. Aaron Carter thanked Margaret Carter, under his breath. Together, they let the petals go. The roses drifted apart and then aligned again, caught by the same current. Separate, connected, moving forward. No music swelled. The moment didn't need a soundtrack. Twilight deepened, and laughter came easier. Aaron Carter told a story about failing piano as a kid and paying the teacher in compliments. Ethan Brooks Lawson countered with a tale about hot wiring a lawnmower to impress a girl and mowing nothing but air. Danielle Brooks laughed until tears dotted her cheeks. Even Richard Lawson told one, a quiet memory of a younger man too proud to dance and a woman who swayed anyway, teaching him rhythm by forgiving his feet. "I should have followed you then," he said to Danielle. She squeezed his hand. "You're here now. Try not to step on toes." When darkness finally gathered, the harbor light strung a necklace across the water. The 4 of them walked back slowly, no one leading, no one lingering behind. Ethan Brooks Lawson slipped an arm around Danielle Brooks. Aaron Carter fell into stride beside Richard Lawson, not with ceremony, but with ease. There would still be hard days, old reflexes, fresh misunderstandings, but the storm had spent itself. At the corner, they paused beneath a street lamp, faces warm in the amber glow. "Home?" Danielle asked. 3 voices answered yes. They didn't look back. Some endings are only beginnings that finally learn their names.